Hi guys, so last time we did CLC and today, because of the poll results, we're doing Itzy. Let's go. Okay, so I've been really excited to actually do the Itzy video because yes, they're a very new group. Yes, they haven't had that much content or that many songs and they're predominantly a dance focused group and vocally they're not necessarily the most impressive right now. However, there are a few things I kind of want to mention for a few different members because I see a lot of things online, particularly for one person, but I'm sure we'll get to that when we get to that I just really want to debunk and really kind of be more fair to the people in this group because they're all really talented. They do all train really hard to be at the level they're at, and yes, they're dancers predominantly, but their vocals are still pretty solid, and I'm really looking forward to mentioning them all the way through. Also, as we go on and they have more songs or more content, I am willing to do a re-rank of these guys because they are literally, like a year and a half into their careers, and they will only improve as we go on. But right now, this is what you guys wanted, so let's get on with the Itzy vocal ranking. Okay, so in last place, the most vocal limited is my girl, Ryujin. For anybody curious, she's my ultimate female bias. I love Ryujin to pieces. She's so cool and so awesome. Unfortunately, vocally, probably the most limited. Let's watch her sing and we'll break it down.
어디 갔다 왔어?
믿던 너의 심장과 나를 깨 했던 이야기도 왠지 멀리 있는 것 같아. So bad bad 차라리 이기적일래 눈치 보느라 착한 척 상처받는 것보다 100번 멀리 떨어져 있지. 쉽지는 않은 그런 얘기. 기분 흐린 날이 참 반가워.
Alright, so the first thing I'd really like to say is Ryujin has improved leaps and bounds since Mix 9. I believe it was Mix 9 that she was on, where there's that one clip where she's kind of going out of key quite a lot and breaking a lot of the time. That is not indicative of this vocal ranking whatsoever. She has come on leaps and bounds since then. Okay, so Ryujin is obviously predominantly the main rapper and a very good dancer, so her vocals don't need to necessarily be the best. And for that role, she does an adequate job when it comes to more vocal songs. She has a part to play and she can do some certain things. So the lower end of her voice is actually pretty solid, it's pretty consistent. She has relatively okay tuning. All the way through, the tuning isn't perfect. It does fall off a little bit here and there. And her voice sounds a little bit shaky and a little bit unstable in certain areas. But when it comes to the lower part of her voice, it's smoky, it's connected. There's no obvious huge placement issues down at this part of her voice. Even into the middle part of her voice, like the lower end of her mid-range, she's still pretty solid. The placement's still pretty consistent and there isn't too much air in the sound, isn't too much breath in the sound. It's a nice connected full sound and be it slightly limited in terms of vocal production and dynamic ability. As she goes up, the main issue arises. She goes very obviously kind of hyper nasal and she's not really super comfortable in this higher key of any kind of style of vocals. So as she delves into this upper part of her voice, it does fall into her nose and she starts pulling a little bit from the throat. And her voice gets really unstable the higher she goes. As I say, in the mid-range, in the middle of her voice, she can just about alleviate this issue with a pretty solid connection, good chord closure, and have some ability in the low to middle parts of her voice. But as she goes up and the placement goes more in her nose, it gets stuck in there and it starts singing from the throat. And I have heard quite a few times where she goes above this middle place where her voice is comfortable, it can start to crack and it can start to sound a little bit unstable and not really have much in the way of dynamics to go above that. But it's really difficult to sing in a hyper-nasal form if your voice is naturally attuned to sing the slightly lower, more middle place. So Ryujin's voice, it has a lot of potential. There's a lot of places it can go if she can work out how to bridge the gap between the mid-range and the higher part of her voice, which as of right now isn't perfectly done due to the more nasal placement. She has decent enough chord closure and has ability of dynamics to a point, so I think she will get it there in a few years and will have a pretty decent upper range. But as of right now, her range is pretty limited. Her voice isn't dynamically super varied. And it does crack and get a little bit unsustainable as it goes higher due to the nasal placement and the throaty placement that she does implement on occasion. But her voice will improve in future and she will get better. But as of right now, she is the least technically able vocalist in this group, but she's still pretty solid. Okay, so Yuna is what, like 16, 17, and she's already like this talented and this recognised as a good dancer and a relatively good vocalist and a rapper and whatever else. Her voice isn't amazing and super dynamic and super versatile, but she does a pretty decent job and in my opinion understands her instrument maybe a little bit better than Ryujin does. Let's watch her sing and I'll try and break it down. Okay, so to me, Yuna is above Ryujin for the fact that she can operate in certain areas a little bit more efficiently and a little bit more comfortably, and she, with the technique that she implements, that is admittedly a little bit unvaried and undynamic, has a slightly easier time getting through all the voice, in my opinion, than Ryujin does. Okay, so Yuna has a pretty obvious, really kind of whiny, forward, nasal voice. It's a very high, cutesy voice. Again, she is very young, so she had a lot of time to make it more forward, more rounded, a little bit darker, if that's something she wants to try and implement in the future. But as of right now, she does have a really forward nasal tone, and that thins her vocal tone out the entire way. So she has a really easy time in kind of higher areas and middle areas. However, the nasal placement, it's an effective thinning out tool to a certain point, and if you get very used to it, like Yuna is clearly very used to this kind of whiny, more forward nasal placement, she can operate in the middle to upper end of her voice pretty efficiently, and she has a nice chord closure. It's not too airy, not too breathy, so she can actually project pretty well up in this higher key kind of efficiently. The only issue with this nasal placement is because she doesn't place the sound more in her head or more forward like a bigger, darker sound, she has no real ability above that. So when she's kind of kind of key, she's totally fine, but as she tries to move up into that place, her voice totally falls off, which means she has no dynamic potential really to get into a really hyper effective mix or in terms of any sort of really well used head voice ability. So when she kind of goes above this nasal placement, a lot of the time the voice becomes just air or into a falsetto because she doesn't have the knowledge or the ability to place more forward into this really good mixed space. As well as that, Yuna's voice is the least varied of everyone else I'm going to mention coming up, because her low range, while is there isn't too much projection down here because her voice is much more adept in this middle to upper place because it is so high, so nasal, and has more of an affinity in that area. So to me, her voice is pretty decent. She can operate in a higher key nice and efficiently due to the thinned out nasal tone, but she can't really go too far above that due to a lack of kind of placement knowledge right now, and she can't operate too much lower than that because her voice naturally isn't as adept in this area due to having a higher soprano tone. So I think in future she will be a lot better. I think she understands her voice a little bit better than Ryujin and can operate in more areas than her just about right now, and in future she could well be a very good vocalist if she sorts out certain placements and gets above the particular nasal placement that works in the middle to upper part of her voice. Okay, so I think everyone saw the placement of Cherry Young come in. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering her name. It's very hard to say, Cherry Young. She's obviously predominantly a main dancer, but she has a pretty decent voice. It's not quite as powerful as the next two guys coming up, but it's a little bit more relaxed and varied than the two guys I mentioned so far. Let's watch her sing.
잊지 않길.
Okay, so Chaeyoung's voice could easily be a lead vocalist voice in this group. It has a really relaxed, easy quality throughout quite a few different ranges, so she can operate in a lot of different places in quite a few different keys to make her voice nice and reliable, nice and sustainable. Okay, so all the way through, her voice has a little bit extra air in the sound. It's not super breathy to the point where she has no chord closure and relies on it as a crutch and can't get into any dynamic areas. No, she uses it to thin out and relax her vocal tone all the way through, so when she's singing in this middle to low place of her voice, everything's very easy. Occasionally it sounds a little bit whiny and doesn't always connect and mix in the most effective way ever, which can lead to a few different voice cracks. So it's like sometimes, which isn't the most optimum technique, but when she doesn't let her voice do that more kind of whiny quality, it's relaxed. It's got a bit of extra breath in the sound. The middle part of her voice sounds really solid and really easy. As she moves up, she tends to stay with this slightly more airy, easy, thinned out light coordination, which allows for the middle part and the high part of her voice to be achieved pretty efficiently and pretty well. Luckily for her also, she does implement a little bit of chord closure here and there, which allows for her to have a pretty decent mixed voice. She can belt to a point. It's not as effective as the next two guys coming up, and her voice dynamically doesn't have all the places to go into with as good placement to really achieve the most out of her voice. But in terms of the range that she operates in, the spectrum that she operates in, the fact that she has a more light delivery, a little bit more air in the sound to thin out all the way through, as well as a little bit of chord closure to allow for a slightly bigger, darker sound up at the top, particularly in the icy verse that she does, or the bridge that she does, where she's going, I see, but I'm on fire. That requires a little bit of chord closure to achieve that particular sound in that particular key. So I think Chaeyoung's voice has a lot of potential. It could go places very easily because she has the ability to thin out and the ability to have chord closure. And once she brings those two together perfectly, she will have a really nice mixed voice, I believe, if JYP doesn't do his classic half air, half breath, half air, half muscle kind of sound that he likes to implement sometimes. So I think her placement's pretty solid. I think the way that she delivers the vocals and thins it out is pretty efficient and pretty effective, and she has some nice chord closure. She just hasn't got this most dynamic ability to get into a mixed voice as of right now and bring everything together, but I think that will certainly come, and the fact that the middle of her range is thinned out quite effectively means that she has good potential to get higher. So yeah, I think she's a pretty decent vocalist. Okay, so here's the nitty gritty. Here's probably what people wanted me to talk about the most. Is Yeji a better vocalist or is Leah a better vocalist? I have a lot to say on this, so just bear with me. I do want to mention, Yeji's a bit of an all-rounder, isn't she? Bloody hell, this girl can do a lot of things and I'm excited for her career. She's so good. She's a great vocalist, but she's lead vocalist for a reason. Let's watch her sing.
I know if I go there's just no telling how far I go. Lying beside you, here in the dark, feeling your heartbeat.
Right, let me just preface all this by saying, when I first listened to Itzy, first without delving into anything, I was Team Yeji as well. Yeji is regarded as better for one kind of predominant reason. She can sing high. Now, high doesn't always mean better. Her technique is decent and it can make her belt in really good areas and do lots of things very efficiently, but there also is some vocal limitations that I have noticed very easily. She operates in the soprano belter role in this group because all K-pop is written so high, you need somebody that can sing high parts, and Yeji's voice in this group is the one that can say the connected the most easily, the highest in range, which is why she gets most of the lines and most of the ad-libs, and Leah doesn't look like a great main vocalist, but I will get to her in a minute. Yeji's voice is very good all the way through, but she has a few obvious technical limitations that stop her from me being first. When she's in the middle and low part of her voice, it's nice and it's relaxed, but it's not super dynamically varied. There isn't really too much in the way of much sound because she doesn't really sing low a great deal. She always sings in this high, belted, connected configuration a lot of the time, which means that as she sings in the low and middle parts of her voice, it lacks the tonal quality, it lacks the consistency and the variety, in my opinion, that number one does have, but we will get to her in a minute. I'm very excited to talk about her. But Yeji operates very obviously and very easily in this really high belter key. She achieves it pretty well and pretty efficiently, and there's a reason that she does most of them, but her technique still isn't like super optimum right now, but she will get there. So Yeji has a pretty obvious nasal placement, which all the way through, as I always mention, does thin out the vocal tone. If you're used to singing in that way, you can add connection, you can add certain vocal styles and flavours to make that particular part of your voice pop and work really well. So Yeji has a good chord closure. She stays very connected the higher that she goes, and she has the ability to mix in this forward, really mixed place. However, it's very obvious sometimes that she is pulling a little bit from the throat because her voice is so stuck nasally, rather than make it a more rounded, open, dark sound kind of as she brings it more forward. Her voice operates in this area very efficiently. She's the one that could do the high ad-libs. She has the connection up in this higher belt key. There's a reason that she does it, and she does it relatively efficiently. I would like her to round her sound out a little bit more, make it a little bit darker, a little bit more open, rather than having this hyper nasal and like kind of pulling from the throat a little bit. You can hear as she goes into her upper extremes, she gets there, but she probably couldn't sustain those notes and those belts for a huge amount of time without it feeling a little bit coarse on her throat. So Yeji, yeah, she operates in the soprano role. She has the highest voice, the most ad-lib potential, the ability to mix in this highest key of everyone in the group. But high doesn't mean better, and she achieves it well. But there's somebody that achieves the rest of her voice a lot better, in my opinion, for a lot of different reasons. Okay, so just to preface this entry, when I get into the actual entry of Leah, I might go on a small rant, so bear with me. It's not really what I want to do, but I kind of have a little bit to say on that. Leah, in my opinion, is the best vocalist in this group, and as she grows in confidence and kind of has songs written in her key, she's going to be very good one day. So let's give her some time, wait for it, but right now she's the best, and I'll explain why.
When the sale comes first. 그냥 그 자리에 서서 알겠다고 했어. 만나면 어떻게 내 맘 바꾸게 나도 느끼지.
Okay, so I just want to preface all of this by saying Leah's confidence clearly took a huge shot from people online, really being very mean about her vocals and everything else that she did wrong. At the end of the day, she's an idol. She trains her best to be in a group, to sing for us, to dance for us, to perform for us, the best of her ability. And the fact that people hated her so much has massively affected her confidence, and you can see that in certain encore stages where she doesn't seem confident or comfortable singing unless Yeji's singing with her or whatever, because people have made her feel so insecure about her vocals, thinking that she's not a good enough lead vocalist or main vocalist. People need to back off and leave her alone and understand that K-pop is a genre that is written in such a absurdly high key that not everybody can fit that particular role. And people say that Leah has the main vocalist role, so Yeji doesn't have everything. Yeah, maybe that's true, but Leah is a really great vocalist and she has some very good vocal qualities that I'm going to mention in 1 second. But people just need to really chill out and leave her alone, because confidence is a real thing. If people just at you all the time, it's going to chip away at you. So that's why she isn't super confident right now, I don't feel like. In years to come, as she grows and less people bully her for her vocals, she is going to be awesome. So just honestly watch the day. One day Leah is going to be amazing. Okay, sorry about that. So vocally, Leah has a much naturally thicker, deeper voice than the soprano key. If everything meant high was better, sure, Leah would be number 2. She doesn't have the best time in the soprano key, because guess what? Not everyone is a soprano. She is a mezzo-soprano, even a high alto, I'm not fully sure, but her voice is thicker, it's lower in tone, and when she's in the middle and lower part of her voice in a song that sounds comfortable for her key, i.e. not shy, did you hear how much more comfortable she was in that song because she wasn't being forced to sing in this stupidly high soprano key? No, she sounded so much more comfortable because all the way through her voice has the best tone, she understands it the best, she has great projection, great intonation, she has great pronunciation. Her voice all the way through has a great chord closure, a great connection, and the ability to thin out and lighten into a higher space. Yes, it's not as as high as Yeji. Yes, it's not as powerful or as comfortable as Yeji in this higher key, but all the way through in the middle and low end of her voice is smoky, it's connected, it's jazzy, it's nice, it doesn't have any obvious super bad placement issues. And as she brings it up past this middle space, it's not the most comfortable place for her voice, be it thicker and a little bit lower, but she just thin out nice and efficiently. She uses a little bit of breath sometimes to sing a slightly higher key, i.e. the price tag Jessie J cover that she did. She was like, everybody's got a price. It was much more comfortable because she was singing with a little bit more breath in the sound to lighten out that vocal tone. And then as she goes higher, she has the ability to belch. She has ad-lib potential. Again, it's not as comfortable or as high as Yeji necessarily, but she can open it up into a nice mixed space. And yes, it sounds still a little bit throaty, but that's a confidence issue and being forced to sing in these really super high notes and super high keys. So one day she will bring that all together, work out where her voice can really pop in terms of a belt key. But in terms of the middle and low parts of her voice all the way through, it's by far the most polished in the group, has by far the most dynamics, the most intrigue, it's the most varied, it's the most well achieved, it's the technically most proficient, and as she goes up, she will get there. And if her confidence is allowed to grow from people not bullying her all the time for little mistakes she might make and not being able to sing as high as Yeji, then she's going to get there. If we just let her be and vocally train and get as good as she can be in a higher area, she will be. Because right now she's doing really, really, really well, has a great voice, and will only get better in future. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching that. Sorry I went a little bit of a rant there. I've seen a lot of people bully Leah's voice and it really irks me because it's unjustified critique some of the time. Okay, so next I'm going to go back in time a little bit and go for G-Friend. I know a lot of guys have wanted me to do them for a long time, and their main vocalist is someone I want to talk about because I reacted to her on my Patreon and it was awesome. Okay, so without further ado, thank you so much for watching this episode and goodbye.